Great. Well, welcome everybody. And I'm excited for the topic today because this is a question from one of our regular participants, which I love. I love talking about things that are relevant to you. So as we talk today, if you have questions come up or you think of topics relating to improving your relationships, please feel free to send those in because I like responding to that and we have good questions. So today, the question was around how do I simultaneously grieve the losses that I need to grieve as I work on my recovery and still enjoy my life, still engage in the positive aspects of my life. And this is one of those things that I think the water of recovery is full of this feeling, but it's something that we may not recognize is going on or recognize our importance, the importance for us to circle around and to really get what's going on here. So I'm going to see if I can clarify just a little bit kind of that holding two separate spaces at once idea. There's actually a word for it. It's called a dialectic. And a dialectic is where you have two opposing truths, which may sound weird because often when we think of truth, we tend to think of there's just one truth or, truth is this, but not that. But really there are lots of things in this life where two opposing things, two opposite things are actually both true. And a dialectic means that we hold those truths together, which I think is far more the appropriate place to hold things rather than trying to pick a side or pick an extreme. So an example of a dialectic, looking at the dialectic of passivity versus aggression, is one of those always wrong? Is one of those always right? In every situation, is there a right answer? These are the passive situations and these are the more active aggressive situations. I think the answer to that is no. It really depends a lot on kind of where you're coming from, what the situation calls for. But if let's say that and I work with a lot of folks in recovery along these lines where they may believe that anger is the worst thing ever, or aggression or asserting themselves is the worst thing ever. And so they may not value that truth. They may not value the truth that lies with assertiveness, aggression, anger, and they may be too passive. And there are certain things in their life and their relationships that they're not going to be able to do because they can't hold the value of being able to do both. Another example of a dialectic would be the tension between contentment, I have enough, this is great, and that drive for improvement. This is something that I see in recovery all the time. You walk into your first room, whether you're an addict or you're a spouse, and if it's a healthy room that you're walking into, you'll get the feeling that you're okay just as you are, and we accept you just as you are. And at the same time, we're going to help you be better. Now, if we take each one of those by themselves, it seems like they're mutually exclusive, but really they work beautifully together. And that's actually where I think a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of hope is held in being able to improve for the future. Is I am okay as I am right now, and I can also do better. Putting this into a statement, and if there's any parents out there, you've definitely felt this. Any of you with a significant other, you've probably felt this. I love so-and-so, and they drive me crazy, and it's hard to spend time with them. Could you imagine if you organized your life around just one extreme in that sentence? I just love this person, and I never acknowledge how crazy it makes me feel to spend time with them. And so I'm in this love trap. Or if you just organized around, it's so hard for me to spend time with this person, and you never do that, and your heart's always longing for them. So these dialectics are everywhere. And being able to recognize them and to recognize where we fall on that spectrum of truth, or where we tend to fall on that spectrum of truth, and what we might need to make room for, I think is one of the ways that we are able to do things like grieving loss and enjoying the life that we have right now. When I got into therapy the first time as an adult, I had this wise old therapist. He even looked the part. He had long white hair, and he would pull it back with a scrunchie, and he always wore socks that matched his scrunchie. That's beside the point. That's just an interesting tidbit about my therapist. But we were working on how I experienced emotions and how worried I was about having the wrong emotion for the wrong situation. And he had a lot of kitschy stuff around his office, like rocks, little doodads. Now being a therapist for 10 years, I I know why therapists collect things like that in their office. You get little artifacts from things that you've done, little mementos that clients might leave. And he said, there's a lot going on in my room right now, John. He said, why are you paying attention to me? And I said, I think you're the most relevant thing going on here. Honestly, I don't want to pay to come and look at your rock collection. And he said, does the rock collection cease to exist because you don't pay attention to it? And I said, no, it doesn't. And he said, your emotions are the same way. There's always all of those emotions going on at any given time for you. And what you experience tends to be what you put your focus on. And he said, there will be some things that you will mindfully put your focus on because maybe you want to feel good, or maybe it's time to grieve. And there's other things that are going to command your attention. You can't do anything but grieve during that time, or you can't do anything but smile during that time. And so part of how we hold that space where I have a lot of pain and I have a lot of good things going on right now is we get used to, I think, the reality that things have a rhythm. One of the reasons why we might hesitate to go to our grief and our pain is we may feel like it would overtake everything else in our life. And I think when we fight against grief and pain, it definitely comes out stronger because it needs to be paid attention to. It's the same thing when we are in willful denial around the hard things in our life. They tend to crop up stronger because we're not doing anything about them and we're not paying attention to them, and they're trying to get our attention. They exist for a reason. And so one of the ways that we start to deal with that is we may start to recognize, is there a natural rhythm to my grief? You know, maybe my grief comes up every time I have contact with an ex, or every time I have contact with my family. And maybe my enjoyment comes up reliably when I'm with safe, recovery supported people, or maybe my joy comes up when I'm with my children or I'm with my significant other. And there's a natural rhythm to that. Just because we move into grief doesn't mean the joy is never going to happen again. And oftentimes we have to remind ourselves this is just temporary. This is the wave of the sea right now, but the sea has a rhythm. It comes in and out. Another way that we can actively work with dialectics is we can monitor the language that we use in our brain. We tend to be a very divisive kind of a society, and I think this is how human beings on a very base level try to seek safety, is we try to get certainty and we try to get correct answers. And so we use a lot of but language in our minds. So this can show up when you talk with your partner or your children. I love you, but you have to stop leaving the fridge open. What a but means, both for other people and for ourselves, is ignore everything that I just said. So it's an extreme way of thinking. When I have a friend who I can tell she's worked really hard on this, because she'll always pause when she gets to a point where you would insert a but, and she says, and. You know, so I love you, and when you leave the fridge open, it drives me crazy. Can you work on that? So in our mind, when we replace but with and, when we're looking at those two truths, we start sending the signal to ourselves that there's room for both of those to coexist. We can also mindfully commit to feeling what's in front of us, knowing that it'll pass, much like a craving. So those of you who are dealing with addiction, one of the tactics that you have learned in dealing with cravings is knowing that they're not permanent. You know, it may be, I'm going to feel this intensely for 5 minutes. I'm going to feel this intensely for 10 minutes, 2 hours, maybe a day. But over time, that feeling is going to shift. It's not going to stay this way forever. So when the more difficult, maybe more negative emotions come up, reminding yourself that it has a shelf life. Reminding yourself that it will shift on its own. And we don't have to move into that, I've got to make this move, or I've got to really feel this now. We know that it has a rhythm, and that it will essentially, as we're mindful, as we're focusing on being healthy and practicing our recovery principles, it will essentially take care of itself. It'll run its natural course. So I'm just curious, in the group, what are some of the dialectics that you find yourself in right now? What are some of those opposing truths that are kind of at the center of how you're living your life, how you're doing your relationships? If you want to put those in the chat feature, we can discuss those a little bit.
Someone commented, I have a lot of these dialectics in my life and I find it confusing, as I prefer to have things neat and tidy and sorted. Well, of course we do. So.
Right? I think there's a lot of perceived security in having things neat, tidy, and sorted. I look at that as the kind of security that exists with a temporary dam. Like it might be diverting things for now, but if anything more intense comes along, it's probably going to break down. And I think our categories, our judgments, our sorting things out, they have a way of doing that, because life and people are much more complicated than being able to sort into neat silos.
I think when you're talking too about the emotions, like that you don't have to feel them right now, they have a natural course. I think it's really tempting to go, I don't want to deal with this, so I'm going to tuck it up on the back of the shelf in the closet and not deal with it.
Yeah.
You're not understanding that by doing that, it's gonna leak out somewhere too. So
Yeah. And at the same time, here's a dialectic. So there's that extreme where we may put it away and never deal with it. I think there can also be the extreme of, well, it's up for me right now, so I've got to do it.
yeah.
Is your child's dance recital the place to have a knockdown dragout fight with your ex? Probably not.
Probably not.
It's something that we might want to shelf and come back to. And then there's going to be other times where we may say, I just keep running from this. I need to create some space and some time so that I can just start to feel this and start to accept this.
So somebody writes, and she, to continue on, it shows up in my body. I clench my jaw and tense my body up. And I find I do my shoulders too. It's like if I'm holding stuff, I do that. So this person says, not sure if it applies. My husband uses but frequently, all in caps, when he starts talking in a conversation, and he doesn't understand how this basically negates what I said and is argumentative, even when he claims he is just adding to the conversation and not meaning to negate or argue.
Yeah, so when you take this dynamic and you put it between two people, you see how very quickly this whole, like, there's only one truth, or there's only one correct way to see this, how it leaves somebody out. And internally, I think there's parts of us, parts of our personality that hold certain truths for us, hold certain drives for us. And when we start saying never, no, but, we start disenfranchising these parts. And think of how unsettling that feels when you're in a conversation with somebody, and every time they respond to what you say, they say but. You want to wring their neck, you want to go away, you want to yell. It tends to, I think, intensify suffering when we're trying to exclude always this but never that. And the truth is, it's usually both and. It's a lot of this and a lot of this.
Well, I think, if that was the constant answer I got, I would just shut down. It wouldn't be worth trying to keep having a conversation, because I would feel like, well, I'm not being heard, quite frankly.
Yeah. Got another comment.
Exactly. This combined with his frequent interrupting me or finishing my sentences. Yeah, that would be. Well, go ahead, because I'm thinking, well, some marriage counseling for conversation might be.
Absolutely. And again, I think this points out, if it doesn't work in a relationship with another person, it probably doesn't work within you either. And so whenever I have these experiences in an interpersonal situation, I've learned to take it back and to say, how do I do this inside of myself? How am I doing with room for a lot of different truths, or how am I doing with room for a reality that might be segmented? How am I doing with, can I feel two ways about something? Most of us, if you take any situation, we do feel two ways about it. When I work with folks who are married or in a relationship with an addict, a lot of them will be very distressed. I've read a lot online, there's no hope for my partner. And I must be crazy for wanting to stay. And I look at that dialectic that a lot of partners are caught in. This person has really hurt me. They really betrayed me, but I can't think of anybody that I love more. I can't think of anybody that I'd rather be with. And that's not the product of some defense mechanism or the product of some kind of off thinking. It's truth. And I think a lot of recovery for spouses is navigating that dialectic. This person can be so dangerous to me. At the same time, this is the person that I have my best memories in life with. And we have to be able to navigate both of those. We can't, when I've worked with couples and it's gotten too hopeful too quick, I'll usually hear from the partner who says, now, wait a minute, like, I'm not ready for this kind of trust. I'm not ready for this kind of connection. I'm still trying to figure out how this person hurt me. Or if it's too dire, if it's too strict in the beginning. Wait a minute, we wanted connection. We're not trying to end this. We're trying to repair this. So there's often a very, I wouldn't call it a fine line, because I think that space between two opposing truths can actually be really broad and really wide. There's a lot of space there, but it's not always easy to find. And that's really what we're going for, both internally and in our relationships, is what's that space that accommodates all of the truth and all of the reality that's happening.
I think, when you were talking, I was thinking about codependence, because, codependence is written, I love this person and their behavior isn't working. It's hurting me. It's hurting our family. It's hurting whatever, but I still love this person. So I want to be, I think I want to be in a relationship, and I need them to do things differently. So,
yeah,
or I need to do things, whatever, but I think it's that space. And I think within that, still navigating and finding boundaries that are helpful without doing the butt and shutting everything
yep.
down. So, okay, so somebody says, going to visit my family of origin in the area I grew up in and lived 10 years after divorce. I have started a new life and got into recovery as soon as I moved. I found it hard to go back and be hit with the grief and unprocessed feelings I ran from. Grief of the loss of seeing my grandparents, the grief of the loss of the fantasy that they will always be there, and seeing them get old is hard, and hold it that my life is good here.
I often see this with folks who leave a difficult situation, is when they return to it, they can actually feel guilty for having left and their life improving after they left. And sometimes, depending on the level of dysfunction in our families, and all of our families have dysfunction, depending on the level of dysfunction, sometimes we can't get healthy unless we separate. Talk about a warring emotion there. Like, these are people that I'm loyal to. These are people who I've spent my whole life helping. And the way that I interact with them now is ultimately killing me. And so there's definitely some of that, like when you return to the place where maybe a lot of heartache happened, also a lot of good memories, you may be hit with the grief of, I got out and they didn't. Life changed for me and it didn't for them. And that's hard to hold, especially when we're younger. What it means to have a strong relationship is just to be close to somebody, in proximity wise. And as we get older, we can hold, I think, more of that space for relationships that are a little more complicated. The same therapist, we also worked on my concept of friendship. And he asked me if I still had contact with anybody from high school. And I said, yeah. And he said, why don't you count them as friends? And I said, because I only see them like every 3 years. And he said, well, how does it feel when you get back together with them? And I said, we pick up right where we left off. And he said, there's some relationships that can do that. They don't require your constant maintenance and your constant checking in. They're just strong relationships, and you get together and you reminisce and you appreciate what it feels like to be around each other, because that's what the relationship was built on in the first place. And that's a concept that, until somebody told me it was possible to think that way, I didn't think it was possible for relationships to exist like that.
So she adds, it would be easy to stay here and never go back. I love seeing my family, and it gives me much work for therapy. Families do that, don't they? Give us therapy. And I have fear that I'm never going to come out of it, and the emotions will take me down to the breakdown I had at my rock bottom, and the impetus to leave the area. And the reality of seeing this time that although things have changed and my relationship with my family is better, this time I was hit with the truth that they aren't changing. And I had hoped that things had shifted, but I had to put boundaries up and have the grief of that. And the grief of having a lot going on and not being able to tell my family because they can't handle it and would hurt the more, and grief from my childhood comes at the same time. I've got so much going on and I'm doing it alone. These people can't handle it.
What a poignant dialectic. Everything has changed and nothing has changed. And being able to pinpoint where those truth lies. Everything has changed within me. Nothing has changed within them. I think in recognizing those two truths, there's an invitation here to accept, these people are doing the life that makes the most sense to them, and the life that I live may not make a lot of sense to them. And there may be, again, some truth in recognizing that I may experience my love for them as love from afar. Even though I may go visit and I may spend time with them, I probably don't invite them into the intimate details of my life. And there's a legitimate loss there. There's also a lot of freedom there. And if all we go for is I've got to resolve the loss or I've got to embrace the freedom, we miss the whole other side of the equation, that's just as valid. So yeah, dialectics aren't easy. I think the reason why this is an effective way of dealing with things is not because it's a magic bullet, but because it provides a framework for holding some really complicated things and not having to resolve it. We don't have to reduce it down to just one side or the other. I know a lot of people, when they go and visit family, they have to plan in a lot of personal time to care for themselves. They want to connect with those people and they want to keep those relationships strong, but they can't give themselves over to the relationship or over to the setting. That would be a betrayal of themselves. And so, they may spend a few hours with family and then go to a meeting and reach out to somebody and do some good self-care. And then the next day, have a meal with family, and they have to change how they interact. But that change is based in truth rather than I'm working in my fantasy or working my desire to not see the truth.
Well, and I think you say they can't handle it, so I'm alone. And I'm thinking you're not alone. You may be feeling alone within that group because you've made progress and you're in a different space from which you can, I'm sure, have a lot of gratitude. That's a nice lens to look through. Mm-hmm. But you have support and other people in your life that are on the journey, that appreciate where you are now, and aren't looking for you to be who you were. So yeah, it's always complicated. Mm-hmm. So she has, I enjoy seeing my family and I find it really hard. True.
There we go.
I find this is another person I find I desperately want and need to reconnect with my spouse and to reestablish our sexual intimacy, yet I can't even imagine being that close to him. Too much risk, too much pain, yet I miss the closeness and my sexual self. So confusing.
Yeah, this is so recognizing these two truths here, I see for a lot of folks in recovery, both addicts and their partners. Recovery really opens up an invitation to understand these things on a broader realm. We may not have recognized how much inherent risk there is in being sexual with somebody until we've been betrayed. And with that knowledge on board, we may never look at sex the same, but that may not be a bad thing. Recognizing the inherent risk also, I think, opens us to how rewarding and fulfilling it can be when we are kept safe. When our vulnerability is rewarded with gentleness, when it's rewarded with being seen. And then also in here, I miss my sexual self as well as the closeness with my partner. For a lot of folks in recovery from sexual addiction and sexual betrayal, the realm kind of opens up as I need to explore what being sexual means for me. A lot of people experience that only in the context of a relationship. And, the concept that sexuality is bigger than what exists between two people, and it's also something that's very personal. There's a lot of opportunity in recognizing the pain and the confusion. There's a lot of opportunity in recognizing this doesn't have a clean solution. And also, this tension is, I wish for the folks that I work with who have struggled with addiction, I wish for them to be able to feel this tension and to hold it, the pain that they're capable of causing and the reward that they're capable of giving when they're connected in a relationship. I think that's where really great things in a relationship can happen, is when we recognize what a destructive force we can be and what a positive force we can be. I think that tends to check our destructive behavior and call out the best of what we have to give. And that's a hard place to hold mentally. I think it's a very emotional place that we hold it.
Yeah, and it feels like I have to hold it in here, even if the tension in my gut is different, and that is challenging. So, yeah. The other gal says, I get overwhelmed and I feel like I've been working on this for years and it seems to be feeling harder. And the thing that gets me, though, is my life here at hometown now makes it easier for me to handle. And she's watching, her nephew self-destruct. So that's definitely difficult too.
Yeah. So any questions, whether on dialectics or anything else in general, you can put it in the Q&A. Be happy to answer any questions. If you want to learn more about this, there's actually a whole mode of therapy called DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and it really focuses on these opposing truths. It's really good for when intense emotions come up around the opposites. And I'm trying to remember, Marsha Linehan is the person that created that, and she does a lot of writing and help with holding those opposing truths. She does it as a way to reduce intense emotion. So if you want to Google Linehan, Marsha Linehan, that would be a good place to start with reading more about that. It's also really inherent in belief systems like Buddhism and a lot of Eastern philosophies. They tend to be less rigidly categorical and more like there's a lot out there. So there's a lot of places that you can find this in the world. Linehan actually drew a lot from Eastern philosophy as she developed dialectical behavior therapy.
Can you speak a little bit about, because you said help to reduce intense emotion. So how would looking at this from different perspectives help reduce intense emotion?
So I think most of the reason why people get really strongly attached to their beliefs is because that belief is also attached to safety. That belief says the world needs to be this way, or I need my relationships to be this way because that is the best way for it to be. So we got to keep in mind that this is a safety thing. So when we get attached to that belief, what we tend to look for is not the presence of that belief and that working out. We tend to look for threats to that belief. So when we're rigid on one side, what we see is a lot of things that aren't working on the other side. And when we hold doggedly to that, it has to be this way. We see a world that doesn't let it be that way all the time because that's just not how reality works. So when we move to a place that's more like it can be this and it can be that, and maybe this side works better for me, so that's what I choose, but I can also understand why that exists. For me, I value calmness, I value pleasantness. That's more natively me, but I can also see where we need people with hard edges, and I can also see where I need hard edges. But when we say it has to be this way or I'm not going to be okay, then we set ourselves up for a world of suffering because we will never see our need fulfilled in our eyes, if that makes sense.
My puppy's barking at the garbage truck. Sorry. So question, do you have some simple techniques to use when facing intense emotions we deal with when dealing with dialectical issues?
Yeah, so there's a lot more that Linehan writes about, but I'll just note a couple. This may sound really, really simple, but simply taking a big deep breath when you feel that tension, that can be a way that we start to deal with it. Because what that big deep breath does is it gives us space between our automatic firing of our thoughts and our belief system that says, oh, this is how it's got to be, and here's the solution I'm going down. And it helps us to slow down and get a little more present. Like I mentioned earlier, that replacing the but with the and, that can be really, really helpful. Just practicing mindfulness. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Like I think the very best ways to get mindful are to tune into your five senses. There's nothing more current in the moment than what's happening with your five senses. So, practicing mindful touch, mindful sight, mindful taste, mindful music, that kind of stuff really opens us up to being a little less rigid, a little less, it's got to be this, not that. There's also so Linehan talks about how we have emotional mind and we have rational mind. And most people will identify strongly with one or the other. And when we identify with one strongly or the other, we tend to demonize the other side. So, emotional people who are more emotionally minded will say, well, I'm not a robot. And like people are made of feelings, not parts. Or the really rational person will say, I came from a hyper-rational family. Like, we can prove that. There's research on that. Or like, I can show you on my spreadsheet or mathematically or whatever that looks like. You're being too emotional right now. So Linehan talks about where those two converge in like a Venn diagram. She calls that the wise mind. So identifying like how in your body does it feel to be in wise mind, where you can take in information from your emotions and your reason. And if there's other parts of your mind, what does it feel like to be in that place where you can take in things from a lot of different sides? Locking that in as a feeling in the body, or even just like some affirmations. I have a wise mind. I use it daily. Being able to change the way that we initially think about things. And that's really where I think the skill is. It's not in stopping the extremes from happening. It's about recognizing that they do happen and we have to respond to them rather than go along with that programming without challenging it at all.
I like that, the idea of the wise mind and, and being intentional and looking at the different aspects. I also, when you were talking about, saying it differently and using and to connect the two parts, I had this vision of writing out my but statement and then changing it to and looking at the visual of that, because I think for me that would be like a helpful visual technique to go, well, it's not, I've learned in recovery too, that because I can be very black and white, it's, the right and wrong and all that. And I've learned that really life is gray. It's like there's all the different shades of gray, and and there is less that is such absolute. And even with truths, it's like my lens and your lens, we can be looking at the exact same thing, situation, object, whatever, and your truth of what it is and what we see is different. And that doesn't mean either of us is wrong. It's just we're seeing things from a different space. So going back to your example of the emotional and logical, both are true, so I like that, well, if I can get to the place where I'm combining both aspects of it, I will be in the wise mind place. I'll have a better lens on I'll have my glasses radared in, right? So
I'll add something to that writing down. I forgot that's something that I really like to use with clients, and I'll write out a sentence, an extreme statement that they make, and then I'll say, how can we change this so that this statement is more useful to you? And that may be like they take out the but and they put in an and, or it may be that they use less extreme language. And I've seen that be really transformative. Just like I do have an ability to affect how I see the world and how I feel about it. And a lot of that starts with how I talk to myself about this. So like, I love you and I hate you. That would be an extreme. So it may be I love you, and the more useful thing is I love you and it's really hard to spend one-on-one time with you. What are you going to do with hating someone that you love? Yeah. But if you can identify it down to like one-on-one for more than 2 hours is not a good space for me to be in with you, you can do something about that.
Well, for me too, the black and the white, it was like the always and forevers or nevers, like being in those absolute spaces, John, you always, whatever. Well, that feels accusatory and whatever. And chances are you don't always, you may often or, whatever, but to be in a different, to be able to acknowledge, well, it's not really, always, that happens. So this one says, this isn't related to your topic, but I'm wondering if you can speak to the benefits or lack of benefits for the addict putting filters on his electronic devices. Does it help him to resist the temptation of clicking and going down the rabbit hole in the early stages of recovery?
Yeah, this is a great question. And there are so many different ways that filters and accountability can be used. What I tend to prefer when I'm working with folks, if they want to use some kind of electronic accountability, is that we get to know exactly how they're using things electronically. I have some people that are all about getting away with things. So setting a filter up that blocks, it actually just makes it more exciting for them to go and find stuff online. However, with those folks, if I say, let's put something accountability wise on, it's going to block nothing, but it'll send a report to your sponsor. In some cases, spouses want to be on that or whatever that looks like. And they'll say, oh, if this is about accountability, like, yeah, I don't want to have a conversation around I went to these sites on this day. And so it sets up the right barrier within them. I look at all electronic filtering as it's a no trespass sign. And pretty much anywhere where you see a no trespass sign, you can pass it and there's very few consequences initially. it's a reminder that past this point, the rules change, or past this point, you can accept something that you may not like. So, if, and I think it's important too, that the person is bought into the use of the filter. To say you're going to filter your phone now so that you don't have access to anything, that can breed a lot of resentment. But I think talking to a partner or a spouse who may be struggling online and saying, hey, it might bring some peace of mind for me if I knew that you had some help online, whether that was accountability or filtering. What do you think about that? Could you consider that? Could you talk with your therapist or your sponsor about that? So there's a lot of different ways that this can be configured. I have a handful of people that I'm working with right now who the filter and the inability to access has been really relieving to them. I have one guy who said, I started to realize that the only reason why I carried around my phone was to have access to my addiction. And now that I don't have access, I don't have my phone with me, and I find myself enjoying life a lot more. I'm a lot more present with things. So, the early stages of recovery is definitely a place to consider this. And I think Rob still keeps a resource of reviews of filters. Is that right?
Yes, but know that there's new stuff that comes out frequently.
Yeah.
So, it's a good jumping off place, but there could be something new out again, as well. But I like what you're talking about too, with the accountability and knowing the difference between the two. And okay, the accountability, now I'm going to have a conversation, but there are plenty of people, they're going well, it's often the partner, he gave me access to all his passwords. And I'm thinking, he can open up another account. He can have a burner phone. He can have, so it can give us a false sense of security. I think it's if somebody's got buy into it, it's a great, so it really, I think that you're exactly right. Having the conversation about what's going to be ultimately the best, versus, the addict being able to go, well, you have all my passwords. You're, it's all good. You're fine, and the partner's still going but it doesn't feel 100% fine. So,
yeah. If you're looking to break a behavioral pattern, I think it can be really useful in just disrupting that. I've had people use it before where their accountability partner has said, anytime you want the password to this, you just have to ask me. I'm not going to keep you out, but I'm going to keep you accountable. And just that extra few steps of, yes, I can choose to use this, but that extra step of I need to talk to somebody, or I need to say, hey, I'm not in a good place, I want my password. That extra layer of accountability changes the way that they think around it. So I think it can be very, very helpful from a behavioral standpoint, as far as actually changing somebody's internal set point and what they want. Filters aren't necessarily going to do that. I think about it more like that no trespassing sign. If you believe in, if you trust the person who's putting that up there, whether that's yourself or a sponsor or a spouse or whoever, then you'll probably pay attention to it. If it's if you're in that you can't tell me what to do attitude, it will become a challenge. It'll become a game for you to get around.
So someone says, a question on big emotions. Sometimes have an old negative belief that no longer serves me come up, and I see as a new light bulb moment, and I can see things a new way. When the big grief comes up, I struggle to cry and find that instead I can get a huge surge of emotion and comes out as sickness, either flu-like tiredness or actual vomit. I always feel clearer and lighter after. Have you heard of this before? I feel a bit weird when it happens and that I don't really cry, which I get a little frustrated over, and trying not to get hung up on whether you should cry or not. So,
so rather than the right emotion for the moment, which I think can be a dangerous rabbit hole to go around. Am I feeling the right thing? Am I showing that in the right way? The thing that I look for initially is their movement. So if this comes up and it's something that I look at and I'm thinking if I heard this from a friend, I would think yeah, you should cry. When I feel this with me, I just feel sick. Something's happening. You're responding to it. You're reacting to it. And I think it's important to trust that what your body is doing now is probably what it needs, and that may change over time. The research around crying is really, really interesting because we still don't know exactly all the reasons why we do it and why tears can come up in sadness and in happiness. So um, we don't even know exactly all the things that tears do for us. I think it's been heavily associated with sadness and all of that, but I think you look for you as if be worried if nothing is moving. Be worried if you're feeling stuck internally. If you're moving somewhere and you can tell that there's movement, don't judge what that movement is. Get curious about it. Oh, that's interesting that it comes up as sickness in my body rather than tears. What I see a lot with folks that I work with, when they have a sickness response, they're still working through that. I can't believe that this is the truth. There's a lot of, disbelief or even disgust, like this is the truth about this story. And that's a valid emotion too for really terrible things that happen. So I think it depends on kind of where you're at in the process of whatever that thing is. But I tend to go with the philosophy that most of the time there's not a wrong emotion. It may be coming from a place that we weren't expecting it to come from, but it's very likely really valid and dialed into the situation at hand.
Well, and I think it's important that you feel clearer and lighter afterwards. And it's happened after I had a spinal fusion over a year ago. It's like I can't stuff my feelings in my body anymore, and they come out with a big force. It feels like they can't go where they used to.
I see that sometimes a big physical trauma, like it just taxes all of the body's previous coping mechanisms. So if you were good at stuffing before and you had a big physical injury, it takes physical energy to stuff and you may be out of it. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me that it may not be able to go where it went before. And again, here's a sign that things are moving, that I can't do it like I used to do it before. Again, this is that strict categories thing we talked about before. A lot of us feel like there's one solution that I've got to reach and my life will go well after I find that solution. Well, it's always going to be changing. You're always going to be adapting, and that's how your nervous system is supposed to work. We're not supposed to find the right way to think, feel, and believe and then go with it for the rest of our life. We get knocked around and we adjust, and that's a functioning nervous system, one that can adjust and adapt to what happened to us.
So I was thinking when I have some body work done, it's called rolfing, ROLFING, and it's different than a massage, and where she's really moving the fascia, and it's so helpful for me, physically and but emotionally too, because she was doing I forgot where she was even working. I can't remember if it was my abdomen or near my heart or whatever. And it's happened a couple different times. And one time I just started sobbing, like we weren't talking about anything or whatever. And it so tapped into something, some grief and hurt and everything, but really freeing afterwards as well. So when you're talking about I can't stuff it to the places where it used to go. I can relate to that. Yeah. And I don't want to be all tensed up. We've talked before about Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps Score. And I hear often from partners in particular, but anybody who has, been under this constant barrage, and, they have autoimmune issues, they've got, some major health issues. And I can't help but wonder, and actually I know that there's research on it now too, that just, all that holding in, it takes a toll physically, as well as emotionally and spiritually and mentally, whatever, on people as well. So, I think it's great that you're getting it out, even if it isn't in the nice compartment of crying that you'd like it to be. So.
Well said.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I'm going to take a moment while we have a question. I'm going to take a moment though and remind you, there are people who, if you identify as a betrayed partner, there is a betrayed partner drop-in group every Wednesday now at 12:30 Pacific time. We'd invite you to do that. Tuesday night, there's a female sex and love addict group. That is, I think it's 6 p.m. Pacific time. Don't hold me to these times. Go to the calendar and check them out. A male partner group on Thursday nights. There's a there's men's drop-in groups. There's a variety of drop-in groups. Dr. Rob is doing his live Q&A tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Dr. David Fawcett does one every Wednesday now. He was doing it every other week, but he's doing it every Wednesday at 5 p.m. And we have a Prodependence webinar on certain Fridays. Check the schedule for that too. So lots of ways to connect and get support. On Sundays, we've got 3 different things on some weeks in the evenings, a porn addiction, a partner group, and then a men's porn and sex addiction group. And we're adding more. So, keep checking in on that. So this question, can you speak about the following dialectical issue? The addicted mind trying to achieve isolation so he can act on his addiction, yet claiming that he doesn't mean to be so mean. For example, the sex addict is highly offensive and harmful to spouse and family, so they push him away, thus giving him the isolation required to act on addictions, yet saying he doesn't want to leave or get a divorce. Not sure if this is clear. And she adds, the addict wants to be connected to loved ones, yet at the same time pushing them away with the offensive behaviors.
Yeah, so one of the ways that I understand this dynamic, and I would say the majority of the time I work with people on this, it's along these lines. We're hardwired for connection with other human beings, and it's hard to get around that one. You cannot train yourself out of that need to be close to somebody else. Our bodies work better when we're close to somebody else. Our minds, our emotions, all of it works better. However, there's a lot of risk that comes in being seen and being close to somebody else. There's surrender that comes in that. So what I see in situations like this is generally what's going on is the addict is taking rejection onto their own terms. So if I fear being rejected by others, if I'm a big jerk, at least I know why I was rejected. I know it's because I'm spiny. I know it's because I'm a jerk, and I don't have to. In that way of doing things, I don't have to sit around and wait for people to judge me and decide to step away from me. I give them reasons to step away. So I'm controlling the rejection. I'm controlling the hurt. And anytime we're scared of something, control is where we're going to go. So what you see in that behavior, which says, I don't want any of these people. And then neurologically and biologically, what you're hearing is I actually do want to be connected. I just don't know how. This is where I think it's really helpful to expand our understanding from sex addiction into intimacy disorder. I don't know how to be intimate with you. I don't know how to be close. Just this morning, I was meeting with a client, and he lost his mom to cancer at 16. His dad was an alcoholic, a drug addict. And he said, do you think my addiction is just about that? And I said, I think it's a lot about that. And can we try an experiment here for a minute? And he said, sure. And I said, for the next 2 minutes, I'd like to sit in silence and just look at each other in the eyes. And I want you to see if you can tune into what I'm feeling and thinking. And I'm going to try to do the same thing for you. And I said, so I'm going to time this. And I, get my watch set up to do a 2-minute timer. And I said, all right, ready, let's go. And without missing a beat, he said, it's already so uncomfortable. He's like, I can't do this. And I had him talk about what was going on for him. And he said, that's way too much closeness. That's way too much stillness with another person. I don't know if I could ever know what you're thinking or feeling. And that, I would say, for the majority of addicts that I work with, that's a big part of what's going on too, is they don't know how to be close to people safely. And so they control all of the distance. And, that's something that I hope this person that you're referring to, I hope they are getting some good help with that. I went on to talk to this guy. I said, this is why going to recovery support meetings can be helpful. Maybe some of the information they give you is useful, but when you're in a room full of people who accept you just because you showed up, it's going to get a little less risky to be in those relationships. You're going to learn how to cope with that risk a little bit more. So I hope this person is getting some good help from a therapist, from support groups, being able to come out from behind their defensive wall a little bit to be able to tolerate their own vulnerability, and not have to be in such tight control of when and how they're rejected, but to give people a chance to make up their mind on their own.
I'm going to share too. The Seeking Integrity Los Angeles program is a sex addiction and intimacy disorder program. The intensive is designed to move through that, to get to a place where you can tolerate being and have tools to be able to connect in a healthy way with people. So if he is willing to consider a higher level of care, please consider that as well. And I'm happy, email me, call me. I'm happy to share more information about that too. Do you have any advice on how to check in with husband's porn use? How to bring the topic up? How often? Is there a way that won't create tension or an immediate defense mechanism? I loathe asking and only do it every couple of weeks. There's always a relapse after promises not to view.
Yeah, so this takes me back to a skill that we learn in recovery if you work with a sponsor or you work with a therapist. So I don't set appointments with people contingent on crisis. I usually set every so often, whether it's every other week or every week, or with some people I work with a couple times a week, we're going to meet and we're gonna handle what's present for you in that moment. So, we learn that skill in recovery, that accountability doesn't mean every time I mess up. It means I'm regularly checking in with you on what's going on in my world. And I think in couples, that's really helpful too, to have a set check-in. That's one of the first things I work with couples on. Can you guys do a daily check-in? And we're going to make it really structured in the beginning. So, for the addict, you may check in on whether or not you're sober that day. And that may or may not be an invitation for your spouse to ask follow-up questions. It may just be an accountability. No, I'm not sober today. I am talking with my sponsor. I do have a therapy appointment, that kind of stuff. So if we make that a part of the regular routine, but between the two of us, then it's not on you to ask and it's not on him to wait in shame. There's going to be an opportunity every day to get current with each other. Another part of that check-in that I'll normally ask clients to do, can you tell each other one feeling that you felt today? Can you name one thing that happened in your day that you found interesting, important, significant, mind-numbing? Can you share the truth about something that happened for you that day? And what that starts to do in a relationship, it starts to open this space of good or bad, put together or not, I'm going to talk to you every day about where I'm at and how I'm doing. It takes a lot of pressure off the spouse, and it can take a lot of pressure off the addict too. Just knowing that there's a time to get current. So that might be something to ask for. Can we do a daily check-in? Or if you're not in marital therapy or getting marital help, this would be a good time to come in and say, hey, here's the problem. I feel like I need to know, but I don't want to be the person in the position who's asking all the time. What can we do about that?
So he doesn't think it's a problem viewing porn and doesn't know why it hurts me or our marriage. He's not working with anyone on sex addiction. So I'd invite you to invite him, to Dr. Rob's live Q&A tonight, and you can ask anonymously, and you can, and he can be sitting there. We have this often where there's, couples there, he's watching porn, it hurts me, he doesn't understand why, and then he can say, I don't understand why she thinks it's a problem when, it's just porn. So we get that all the time, and then Dr. Rob gets to answer those questions. So it's, but your thoughts?
I was going to say the same thing. Talk to an expert, and Dr. Rob is really, really good at explaining that. I don't know how open he is to reading a book, but I think the book Out of the Doghouse really speaks to that. Like, why is this a big deal for my partner? And I appreciate the way that Dr. Rob talks to the audience that the book is written for. It's very straightforward. I don't find it shaming or sensational at all. It's just a very straightforward, like, this is why your spouse feels replaced by what you're doing. And it gives you a choice. There's another one of those dialectics. Is it important to be me, or is it important to take care of my relationship? If you're on an extreme there, you're going to run into problems. You got to be able to balance that. And, personally, I may not believe that there's a problem with viewing porn, but if that's a betrayal to my spouse, if I want to keep the relationship, I've got to do some reorienting there.
Yeah. And I share this one all the time because I thought it was so great, but Dr. Stan Tatkin did a podcast called We Do, and it talks exactly to what John's talking about. It's like, well, just because I want to do this and I selfishly want to do this, because I want to be able to do what I want to do, but what's going to be best for our relationship? Because if it's the two of us against the world, I want to do what's best for our relationship. So then if he perceives that it isn't a problem to watch porn, well, then if he values the relationship, he should be able to give up porn. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people can. But if he has a difficult time with it, then there might be a different problem. So, And then there is professional help. So the addict and partner wanting to be close yet push each other away. At what point post-seeking integrity program do we get started with that? That's a whole nother conversation. And so if somebody's coming to the treatment program, there's a whole aftercare plan after the, at the end of treatment. So who knows, exactly what's going to be recommended, for every client is different. There isn't a cookie cutter. This is what the aftercare plan has. And, and it's really going to depend. So yes, it is on a case-by-case basis. Husband always has needed stability and easily gets into patterns. Is it okay to emphasize couple work sooner rather than later? I think that really is going to depend on, at the end of the program, what is recommended for him and where is he, where is he on his recovery spectrum, so you can't do couples work, I don't think, and real clinicians have actually enforced this. You can't do couples work when there's active addiction. So, you have to get to a point where you've got a person who's actually able to show up,
And I would put a caveat in there. The kind of couples work that is done, it may not be building our relationship. It may be about, can we get the issues on the table and can we talk honestly? So work with, like, trying to build bonds in a relationship while somebody is primarily attached to addiction is not going to work. But saying, like, hey, we can talk about this. I need to know what's going on. Doing some shame reduction work in coupleships can be very effective if you're working with a therapist who knows how to do that. But again, if you're going to go to seeking integrity, I would follow the treatment team's recommendation on follow up. And when they say it's time for marriage therapy, it may not be the run-of-the-mill marriage therapist can do it. You probably need to work with someone with a knowledge of the ins and outs of addiction and betrayal, so that they can help navigate those. What I see in couples that I work with, if we move too soon to reconciliation during addiction, the partner or spouse will feel blamed for the rift in the relationship, which is not the feeling that we want to give, and that's not going to build a strong relationship. If we move too fast into let's get neurologically synced up, the addict is going to be overwhelmed and they're going to do what they've always done with being overwhelmed. So I think following treatment recommendations is really, really important. And knowing that there's work outside of building the bond between us that can help the two of you together. That's why a lot of treatment centers do family week, where they bring family in. It's not to repair all the rifts, it's to get the conversation going so that this doesn't have to be the elephant in the room.
Okay, so I added the book John mentioned, Out of the Doghouse, and then the podcast that I mentioned was Dr. Stan Tatkin's He wrote a book, so you can buy the book and he'll make 12 cents on that or whatever too. So, but really good podcast, and just a reminder, for a healthy relationship, if you go, yes, this is better for our relationship, even if I don't feel, so I'll just add this, yesterday, my husband and I are taking ballroom dance lessons, and most of the time we're good about practice. I said something about practice. I said, shall we practice? And he said, yeah, let's get it over with. And I said, wow, that's a really inviting way for you to start this whole thing. And he kind of shifted his attitude. He says, well, I'm not really motivated right now to do it, but he got up, he wears his dance shoes. So we practice in our dance shoes, we moved our dining room table. So
wow.
We're committed. So we have this longer space and we've got the chairs our house looks stupid, but we don't care, but he showed up, he did it for our relationship. We practiced an hour and 20 minutes. I couldn't believe he said, they did that for an hour and 20 minutes. I was shocked, but I was like, that I kept thinking that's a we do thing to do. He showed up. He could have had a slightly better attitude about it, but he showed up, he put on his little dance shoes, and and we did it. And I was like, it works. So anyway, that's my story. Okay. All right. Thank you all. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.